Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're going to be covering the various cards that have been introduced within King's Court, including some world premieres. Arcana Triumph Joker is a level 10 light attribute warrior type effect monster with question mark attack and 2500 defense. If this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can send one Queen's Knight, King's Knight and Jack's Knight from your hand and or face up monster zone to the graveyard, special summon this card. This card gains 500 attack times the combined number of cards in both players' hands. You can discard one card to destroy all face up monsters. To destroy all face-up cards your opponent controls with the same type, monster, spell or trap, as the discarded card. Now, as unrealistic as this is, if you and your opponent have a total of 6 cards in your hand each, this does become a 6000 attack monster. More realistically, you and your opponent are going to have at least 4 or 5 cards in total, so it's definitely going to be at least 2500 attack, and that in itself is very decent because you're getting rid of 3 monsters that aren't really that powerful. The discard effect might seem a bit steep, but actually you're able to wipe out however many cards on your opponent's field that happen to be of that type. So if you know your opponent is running a specific types of decks that might be trap heavy, you could discard a trap card to destroy those cards, which means it's a lot more flexible depending on what your opponent is running and how you aim to change and shape around your deck. Joker's Knight is a level 5 light attribute warrior type effect monster with 2000 attack and 1400 defense. You can send one the Queen's Knight, King's Knight or Jack's Knight from your deck to the graveyard, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, this card's name becomes the sent monster's name until the end phase. During the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one other light attribute warrior monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Joker's Knight once per turn. The great thing about this card is this actually works very well to copy one of the names. This might not seem that well, but for King's Knight, Queen's Knight already has to be present on the field to activate its effect. So by being able to steal Queen's Knight's name, you're able to trigger off your King's Knight effect, which lets you special summon your Jack's Knight, and therefore those can be used for a tribute summon. Or you can go into the fusion monster, which is Arcana Knight Joker, or even into their link monster that they've got. You need to consider as well for the secondary effect during the end phase to be able to recover this card. You just shuffle back one of your light attribute warrior monsters. Each of the various knights are meeting this condition, so you're not having to run anything where you have to recover those cards such as Pot of Avarice, which might be a bit too clunky for the deck. Imperial Bower is a level 4 light attribute warrior type effect monster with 1500 attack and 1500 defense. If you control no other monsters, you contribute this card, take 2 different monsters from your deck among Queen's Knight, King's Knight and or Jack's Knight, and either add them to your hand or special summon each monster. You can only use this effect of Imperial Bower once per turn. This again is very consistent for the deck. It lets you just go into any of those knight monsters. So if you've already got one on the field, typically if you've already got King's Knight on the field and you've not been able to get the other 2, that's a good way of doing this, or vice versa if you've got Queen's Knight and you just don't happen to have either of the other 2. This meets a condition very easily, being able to go into your fusion monster or into the link monster. It is a bit of a limitation in that you can only use the effect once per turn, but it is so that it's not abused. And it does give you the choice to either add them to the hand or to special summon them, so it's not limited to what you can do. Joker's Straight is a normal spell card with the effect discard one card, special summon one Queen's Knight from your deck, add one King's Knight or Jack's Knight from your deck to your hand, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one monster. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn, except light warrior monsters. During the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one light warrior monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Joker's Straight once per turn. This is the situation that I was telling you before, that you have to have Queen's Knight already on the field to be able to use King's Knight's effect. So that's the idea. You have Queen's Knight special summoned already set up, then you're able to add the King's Knight, you're able to normal summon that King's Knight as an additional normal summon, and then you're able to just instantly bring out your Jack's Knight without having to use too much cost. The recovery effect also is quite decent because all of these monsters are light warriors, so you can get any one of those back into the deck and then recover this card to the hand, and then that can be used during your next turn. Face Card Fusion is a normal spell card with the effect Fusion Summon one Light Warrior Fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If you control Queen's Knight, King's Knight, or Jack's Knight, you can use one monster from your deck as fusion material. You can only activate one face card fusion per turn. Whilst this might seem like a very specific card for the Knights archetype, this can actually be used by various other ones. It just lets you fusion summon a light warrior monster. And I'm sure there's quite a few conditions on that anyway. It just gives you the advantage if you happen to use the Knights that you're able to use one of the materials from the deck as well. Thunderspeed Summon is a quick play spell card with the effect during the main or battle phase immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one level 10 monster, or if you control Queen's Knight, King's Knight, and Jack's Knight, you can apply this effect instead. Add one level 10 non-dark monster with question mark attack from your deck to your hand, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one level 10 monster. You can only activate one Thunderspeed Summon per turn. This has a bit of double utility. The Knights cards were famously used as tributes for when Yugioh, or the Pharaoh as he's preferred to be referred to summon his Slifer the Sky Dragon, so these were the kind of the three pawn cards that were just used to tribute for it. It's a decent enough effect, and I think Slifer is a level 10 monster, so you can get it through this effect. Or you do have the option of going for the Arcana Knight Joker, which is also a level 10, and because this happens as a quick play, you can sacrifice those on your opponent's turn, which means you're not having to waste one of your normal summons. Joker's Wild is a normal trap card with the effect during the main or battle phase, send one spell card from your deck to the graveyard. That specifically lists all of Queen's Knight, King's Knight, and Jack's Knight. This effect becomes that spell's effect when that card is activated. During the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Light Warrior monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Joker's Wild once per turn. This is also very useful because this can be activated during either main phase or the battle phase, and it lets you just copy its effect of a spell card. Anything that's related to the Knight monsters you can use, and of course you're able to recover this card just by reshuffling one of your Light Warrior monsters, which this deck relies on. Court of Cards is a continuous trap card with the effect if you control no monsters or only control Queen's Knight, King's Knight, and or Jack's Knight, you can special summon one Queen's Knight, King's Knight, or Jack's Knight from your hand or graveyard. You can banish up to one each Queen's Knight, King's Knight, and Jack's Knight from your hand and or graveyard to draw the same number of cards you banished. You can only use one Court of Cards effect per turn, and only once that turn. This does limit itself to how it can be used. You can only use one of either effect per turn, so you can either special summon the Knight monsters to your field, or you can go through the other effect where you can banish them to draw the same number of cards. I'd argue this is a little bit like Magical Mallet because you're able to kind of adjust what you've got in your hand, and maybe you don't need the Knight monsters at that time, but you need other cards. You do have the chance to draw into those potentially game-winning cards a lot sooner than you might within a normal duel. Magnet Induction is a normal spell card with the effect if you control a Magnet Warrior monster whose original level is 4 or lower, special summon one level 4 or lower Magnet Warrior monster from your deck with a different name than the cards you control. Also for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, Magnet Warrior and Magna Warrior monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects. You can only activate one Magnet Induction per turn. The good thing about this card is I think Valkyrian requires 3 very specific monsters, Alpha, Gamma, and Beta. So actually this helps you to just spring out one of those monsters from the deck, and in doing that you're able to then go into your Valkyrian, as well as being able to stop your opponent from activating anything to potentially get rid of your Valkyrian within that turn, and therefore you can, it has I think like 3,500 attack. You can then be able to progress to doing damage without your opponent being able to respond. Hypercannon is a continuous trap card with the effect you must control XYZ Dragon Cannon or a fusion monster that lists XYZ Dragon Cannon as material to activate this card's effect. This card's effect depends on whose turn it is. During your turn, you can target one of your banished Union monsters, place it on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, draw one card. During your opponent's turn, you can discard any number of cards, then target the same number of cards your opponent controls, destroy those cards. You can only use this effect of XYZ Hypercannon once per turn. I think, like a lot of these cards, it's based on the name of the attack. So for example, Blue Eyes White Dragon has Bursting Stream of Destruction, you've got Dark Magic Attack for Dark Magician, and so on and so forth. The first effect, just to be able to recover one of your Union monsters, is quite decent because when they contact fuse, it requires them to be banished, and therefore, unless you're running very specific support, you're not likely to get those cards back. And even though it does go to the bottom of your deck, you do get to draw an additional card, and then you've probably got other cards within your deck that can help to shuffle. The secondary ability is actually a little bit better because you're able to discard any number of cards and just wipe out your opponent's cards. And since these are continuous trap cards, so long as you've got cards within your hand to fuel for the effect, you can continue to use this effect. Goldeneyes Idol is a level 1 Dark Attribute Spellcaster type effect monster with 0 attack and defense. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can activate this effect. Look at your opponent's hand. Also, this card's name becomes Thousand Eyes Idol until the end phase. If this card is banished or sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, equip that effect monster to one Eyes Restrict or relinquish monster you control that cannot be normal summoned. While equipped by this effect, that monster gains attack equal to the attack of the equipped monster. You can only use this effect of Goldeneyes Idol once per turn. This card is very easy to get its effect off. Firstly, by revealing itself and naming itself Thousand Eyes Idol, you can use it to go into your relinquished very easily, or into your Thousand Eyes Restrict, which I think needs Thousand Eyes Idol as a fusion material, and therefore if you're going to be using that to bring those monsters out, you're going to be sending it to the graveyard with an effect. This means you instantly are able to equip a monster that your opponent controls to one of your monsters, and then it gains those attack points. They're also able to use their own effect to gain more monsters and equip those on, and if your opponent is unable to breach that and destroy those cards, they're no longer being able to search for them or to use them for some of their plays. Zelda Profit is a level 4 Earth Attribute Fairy type effect monster with 1700 attack and 1200 defense. If you control an Earth Attribute Fairy type monster, except Zelda Profit, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then look at up to 5 cards from the top of each player's deck. When a monster that was normal summoned by attributing this card declares an attack, you can banish this card from your graveyard, destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict 2000 damage to your opponent. You can only use each effect of Zelda the Prophet once per turn. This is a series of cards, the Earth Fairies, which were used by Ishizu within Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle Tournament, and it was within the Battle City itself. I think it was during the finals against Seto Kaiba. She's able to special summon. It very much relates to how she likes to play because she's able to use the kind of predictive ability of her Millennium Necklace to be able to search and see what's happening in the future. So in this way, she's able to see what she's got from her deck and now from your opponent's deck. So it's kind of playing on that theme, and knowing what your opponent's having within the next few turns is a good way to set up amongst them. Also, this does have the benefit of if the tributed monster declares an attack, it gets destroyed and your opponent takes 2000 points of damage. Yes, this does get rid of one of your monsters, but actually the 2000 points of damage might be enough to destroy your opponent. Number F0 Utopic Drago Future is a rank 0 light attribute warrior type Xyz effect monster with 3000 attack and 2000 defense. It requires 3 Xyz monsters with the same rank except number monsters. This card's original rank is always treated as 1. This card is always treated as a Utopic Future card. You can also Xyz summon this card by using number F0 Utopic Future you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. It cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, as a quick effect, you can detach one material from this card, negate the activation, then if that monster is on the field, gain control of it. This is quite a difficult monster to summon because you do need 3 Xyz monsters with the same rank, so getting those out is quite tricky. You're going to need multiple materials unless you're able to kind of cheat it out. It does have protection from being destroyed by battle and card effects, which makes it quite decent. It does have 3000 attack, which means it's not likely to be taken over by anything, and it's able to act when your opponent's monster activates an effect to to just steal that monster. Since you're going to have 3 Exceeds materials on it when you start off with, that means you're going to be able to use this at least 3 times to steal your opponent's monsters, and hopefully use them for Exceeds material, or even for Link material. Guilty Gear Freed, the Magical Steel Knight, is a level 8 light attribute warrior type fusion monster with 2700 attack and 1600 defense. The materials require 2 warrior type monsters with different attributes. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets this card, as a quick effect, you can negate that effect, and if you do, destroy 1 card on the field. If this card was fusion summoned using only monsters on the field as material, it can make a second attack during each battle phase. Once per turn, if this card battles an opponent's monster during damage calculation, as a quick effect, you can banish 1 spell from your graveyard. This card gains attack equal to half its current defense until the end of this turn. Firstly, I have to say this is quite a powerful Gear Freed card. I know you've got multiple variations. You've got the Swordmaster, which can equip cards from the graveyard, and you've got like Guilford the Lightning. They're alongside the same type of cards. And you've got the original Gear Freed, which prevents you from equipping any cards to it. This one is very decent. It's a fusion monster for starters. It prevents any cards from targeting it because you're able to negate that once per turn. And you're also being able to destroy a card on the field, be it yours where you can trigger off a certain effect, or your opponent's where they might need that specific resource. You get the benefit if you happen to fusion summon using the cards on the field with 2 attacks that can be made per turn. They don't have to be specific to monsters, they can be direct attacks as well. And the benefit as well of being able to boost this card to 3500 attack just by banishing a spell card from the graveyard is also decent because it lasts until the end of the turn. Crystal Girl is a level 1 water attribute spellcaster type effect monster with 200 attack and 100 defense. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can activate this effect. During the end phase of this turn, add 1 level 5 or higher water monster from your deck to your hand. If you control a level 5 or higher water monster and this card in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Crystal Girl once per turn. This is decent support for water attribute decks in general, because you're able to just search for any of your high level water monsters, but it happens during the end phase of your turn, so you're going to have to protect this. This is also quite useful if you've got one of those high level monsters already on your field, and this card's in your graveyard, because you can special summon this card, maybe tribute those 2 monsters, and then bring out one of your more powerful ones. The only downside is once it's sent to the graveyard after using this effect, it does get banished, but there are ways of recycling that effect. It's not limited to once per duel, it's only a once per turn limitation. Dangle Dolls is a level 5 Dark Attribute Fiend type flip effect monster with 1000 attack and 1000 defense. The effect, flip, you can send 1 spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target 1 Dangle monster in your graveyard, except Dangle Dolls, special summon it in face down defense position. You can only use each of the preceding effects of Dangle Dolls once per turn. A Dangle Link monster that used this card as material can make 3 attacks during each battle phase. The flip effect on this card is a little bit useless. Maybe there are some Dangle cards that are spell and trap that actually activate from the graveyard or have a secondary effect from the graveyard. But the nice thing is, since it's generically a spell or trap card, you can then go for anything that might have double utility, such as things like Breakthrough Skill, Lost Wind, just as a couple of examples. This does have the effect where if this is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, to be able to just special summon a Dangle face down in defense mode. Since most of them have flip effects and are flip effect monsters, those can then be used to trigger off effects. And of course, the nice thing as well is it grants the Dangle Link monster the ability to attack up to 3 times within each battle phase, and this doesn't have to be directly on monsters. This can be to your opponent's life points. Given how the Link monsters work within the archetype, this can be enough to defeat your opponent within an OTK. Rose Princess is a level 3 Earth Attribute Plant type effect monster with 1200 attack and 800 defense. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. hand. If summoned this way, treat this card as a tuner. You can only special summon Rose Princess once per turn this way. You can discard this card, add one White Rose Cloister from your deck to your hand. This is a decent effect because not only can it treat itself as a tuner monster, it can special summon itself, and therefore you're able to normal summon and then go into your Black Rose Dragon, or you're at least able to establish a bigger board. The restriction on this is very limited in that it can only use this for a very specific card, that, you know, White Rose Cloister from the deck to the hand. But depending on what that card actually does will determine how powerful this is as an effect. Morph King Stitchy Gel is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type tuner effect monster with 100 attack and 100 defense. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one other face-up monster on the field. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except synchro monsters. For the rest of this turn, also change this card's level to the level of that target. And if you do, gain life points equal to that target's level times 200. During your main phase, you can special summon one Fiend type monster with a level lower than this card from your hand. You can only use this effect of Morph King Stitchy Gel once per turn. There are a series of cards, I think there's a couple of them. There's Stygian Street Patrol, and there's another one which I think were used by Tetsu Trudge, which was the officer in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. The whole idea of this card is it's able to manipulate its level by copying another monster's level, and then you do get 200 life points times the level of that monster. It's a decent effect. You're also able to then special summon a Fiend monster that has a lower level than this card, and hopefully within that turn you'll have several monsters on the field, meaning you can go into a very easy, flexible synchro summon with various leveled monsters. White Rose Cloister is a field spell card with the effect, if you control no monsters, you can special summon one Rose Dragon monster or one plant monster from your hand. You can only use this effect of White Rose Cloister once per turn. During your draw phase, before you draw, you can declare one card type, monster, spell or trap. Reveal the top card of your deck, and if it is the declared card type, apply this effect for the rest of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. Level 7 or higher synchro monsters you control gain 1000 attack. This card not only helps you to establish a field, especially if you've got no monsters already, because it works alongside your Rose Dragons and your plant types, but it gains the ability to boost up your synchro monsters, provided they're level 7 or higher. Most of the Sign of Dragons were level 7 or higher. I think that's the reason why they have this limitation on them, but it does require you to guess what you've got on the top of your deck. If you've gotten it wrong, there's no actual consequence to it. It just means that, you know, you don't get the effect. If you're lucky enough to get the effect, if you've got multiple synchro monsters on the field, you're able to do that much more damage. Burning Soul is a quick play spell card with the effect, if you control a level 8 or higher synchro monster, add one card from your graveyard to your hand, except Burning Soul. Then immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon using monsters you control as material. For the rest of this turn after this card resolves, your opponent cannot target synchro monsters on the field with card effects. You can only activate one Burning Soul per turn. Much like Yusei's Axel Synchro, the Burning Soul was the same for Jack Atlas. He very much used the Red Dragon Archfiend alongside the Red Devil creature to summon his Red Nova Dragon. So I think that's the link between this. It's able to add a card from the graveyard to your hand, and then you're able to instantly synchro summon. If you've got the monsters already on your field, this makes it very easy, and your opponent isn't able to respond to your synchro monsters for that turn, which is again another benefit. And this can be enough to stop your opponent from trying to attack, or at least end their turn until they can think of something to counteract this in the future. Hyper Galaxy is a quick play spell card with the effect, tribute one monster with 2000 or more attack, except Galaxy Eye's Photon Dragon, then target one monster your opponent controls with 2000 or more attack, tribute it, and if you do, special summon one Galaxy Eye's Photon Dragon from your hand, deck or graveyard. You can only activate one Hyper Galaxy per turn. Now, for Kite's deck, most of his Galaxy monsters had the attack points of 2000 or more. Even those that didn't had an effect where they could make their attack points 2000. For example, I think it was like Photon Pirate was an example where you could banish cards from the graveyard, and then you could make its attack points up to 1000 points more times the number you've done, maximum making it 3000 attack monster. That is in itself very decent. You're able to get rid of one of your opponent's monsters, and then you're instantly able to go into your Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, be it from the hand, deck or graveyard. It's not limited, so you actually have no excuse not to run this card. It's very powerful. powerful, and I would argue it's very similar to something like a Monarch style 4th, specifically for your Galaxy archetype. Pendulum Transfer is a normal spell card with the effect target up to 2 pendulum monsters you control. Place those targets in your pendulum zones. You can only activate 1 pendulum transfer per turn. The idea of this is you take the monsters that you have in your main monster zone and you put them in the pendulum scales. That way you don't actually have to return them to your hand and then reset the pendulum scale, and that means you're having to run less specific cards for the deck. Pendulum Exceeds is a normal spell card with the effect target 2 cards in your pendulum zones, special summon both targets but negate those effects. Then immediately after this effect resolves, Exceed summon 1 Exceeds monster using only those 2 monsters. When you do, you can treat the level of one of the monsters the same as the other monsters. You can only activate 1 Pendulum Exceeds per turn. This acts very much the opposite of the previous card, whereas that wanted to get the monsters from the main zones to the pendulum zones. This wants to get those pendulum zones back onto the main monster zones. The nice thing about it is it's very usable because it doesn't have to be 2 monsters that are of the same level. They can have differing levels, and then their levels are forced to be the same, which means you can go into an instant Exceeds monster without having to run very specific cards. Dousing Fusion is a normal spell card with the effect Fusion summon 1 Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your graveyard. Only pendulum monsters can be used as fusion material for this card's effect. You can only activate 1 Dousing Fusion per turn. I like that they've got a specific version of a fusion card for pendulum monsters because there are a few fusion monsters out there that rely on those pendulum cards. And the final new card is Eternal Bond. This is a normal trap card with the effect target any number of photon monsters in your graveyard, special summon them, but their effects are negated. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 photon monster your opponent controls, take control of it, and if you do, its attack for the rest of this turn becomes the combined original attack of all photon monsters you currently control. Also, you cannot declare attacks this turn except with that monster. You can only use each effect of Eternal Bond once per turn. For the first effect, it's actually very decent because you're able to essentially bring out all of your photon monsters, however many you've got, with no limitations on them outside of their effects being negated. You're mostly going to be using them for their attack stat, or maybe to tribute them for a Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. My confusion comes from the secondary part of the effect, because it says to banish it, you target a photon monster your opponent controls, and then you take control of it. And then it gains attack points based on the combined efforts of the attack of all of your photon monsters you already have. So I don't understand how you're giving your opponent one of these photon monsters for you to steal back. It's very bizarre, and it means you can only attack with the 1 monster. And I get the idea, but it's very restrictive because it requires you to interact a lot with your opponent before you can successfully do anything, and that's always a bad position to be in. Of note, there are quite a few reprint cards within this set, and I'll probably go over those in a separate video. All of them have some relation to what's currently out there within this set, but for example, you can see within the first few cards, the Queen's Knight, King's Knight, all of the Knights, all the Jokers, all relevant to the deck, and even you've got cards such as the Zexal weapons which work on the Utopias as well. What do you guys think of the cards that were listed above? Is there anything you liked in particular, or is there anything you just think is too weak? Personally, my favourite is that Head Cannon card. I know a lot of the XYZ Dragon cards were given a lot of attention, but they were forgotten about over things like ABC Dragon Buster, but for no more, I think actually they're a lot better than the ABC Dragon Buster now. Whatever you think, leave those comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.